make sure that folks are able to, oh, you know what? The chat feature is not turned on. 1 second. Let me pop out and fix that. Well, that doesn't seem to be working. So I don't think we're going to be able to use the chat feature. But I'll just say for those that are joining the call now, we're having some difficulties with the chat feature on this platform. So if you do have questions for our panelists, we are going to wait until the end of the presentation. But you can send your questions to MBA-recruiting@amazon.com. And we're happy to try to answer those if we have enough time on the call. So I've got Renee and Deepika from my team who are going to be monitoring those questions that are coming through, and they'll send them over to me as we're going through the panel today. But thanks everybody for joining us. So just a quick intro. My name is Audra Fry, and I lead MBA recruiting for Amazon University Talent Acquisition. I want to thank everyone for joining this call to learn more about our AWS HR, so Human Resources Leadership Development Program, also known as HRLDP. So I'm joined by two lovely HRLDP alums who are panelists and have grown their careers at Amazon, and they're not very far removed from their MBA journey. So our goal today is really to deep dive into the HRLDP, so you can learn a little bit more about the program as you're considering joining or potentially applying. And then we're going to switch gears and talk about the life of an HRLDP recruit at Amazon, their day-to-day role, the customers they serve, and the stakeholders that they deal with. Our panelists are also going to discuss the career path of an HRLDP, the important skills that are needed in this role, and then some of the interesting assignments that they've been able to work on. So if you do have questions, I recommend holding on to them as we'll be doing the live Q&A panel towards the end. As I shared, the live chat feature is not working, so feel free to send those questions when you have them or save them until the end to MBA-recruiting@amazon.com. So I do see the screen. Thank you so much, Deepika, for putting that up there. If you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide. And actually you can move on to the next slide because I already covered that. So if you've been to any Amazon presentation, you will have heard our recruiters touch on the recruiting timeline here at Amazon. Differ between many of our MBA roles. So the first step is always the application. So our HRLDP applications are open now. So if you haven't applied already, we are accepting applicants right now through October 4th. So I would definitely recommend after this presentation, if you're excited about what you've heard, go ahead and get your application submitted. It's live on Amazon.jobs now. We'll also email it out to everyone who attended after today's presentation. The remainder of our MBA internships will be posted on October 1st. So if you're interested in other MBA internships, by early next week, you should be able to have access to those applications. The second part of our process is the online assessment. And one thing to note is that the online assessment is not sent to every applicant. So if you've already applied for the HRLDP internship, we are still processing applicants. So you may or may not receive this online assessment as part of the process. So just, keep a lookout from emails from Amazon, Amazon assessments, not Amazon.com, because I get plenty of those delivery notification emails. The HRLDP internship interview process does consist of 4 virtual interviews that are behavioral based. And so we want you to really excel in this Amazon interview process, since you are doing 4 45-minute interviews. And so if you are selected to interview for this program, I highly recommend that you utilize your Career Services Center to have your resume reviewed prior, to conduct mock interviews with your peers as well, can also be helpful. And, we want you to be interview ready, especially because the interviews are going to be taking place in October and November. So coming up pretty soon. The last thing that I'll share before we get into our panel is why consider this AWS HRLDP program. So it's really unique we are targeting MBA and master students interested in human resources in a 3-year cohort experience. So you'll start as an intern over the summer, and if all goes well, you will benefit from, the training, the networking, just an incredibly robust experience over the summer to then receive a spot in the full-time 3-year HR leadership development program, which, as these two will share, is a lifetime, networking opportunity, cross cohort connections, and a large alumni network as well. So even my boss, who's been at Amazon almost 10 years, came out of this program years and years ago. So some of you will even be able to have the opportunity to participate in recruiting events for future HRLDP cohorts, such as our panelists today. You will receive, mentorship in this program. So you'll receive an onboarding mentor, a mentor from the HRLDP alumni community, and a career mentor to really support your growth framework and, provide you with long-term guidance. And then after 12 months, enroll full-time. HRLDPs do start rotation preparation. So they'll have the unique opportunity to work across multiple AWS business lines and functional areas in roles like HR business partner, builder experience team, talent development, compensation, employer relations, DEI, workplace planning analysis, and more. So really exciting opportunity. So we're so excited to talk to you about it today. So now that we know just sort of the basics about the HRLDP, I'm going to hand it over and to our guests who are former HRLDPs interns and now are in full time in the program. So Ines and Anna, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Ines Estrada. Originally from Argentina, did my MBA at Darden, and currently very excited to be talking to you today and share a little bit more about my experience as an intern last summer, and then now back full-time at AWS.
Awesome. And hey there, my name is Anna Gallagher. I am originally from Seattle, Washington, so happy to answer any questions about life here in Seattle. I went to the University of Washington for undergrad, where I did my degree in business with a concentration in HR. I started my career at Boeing, actually in another HR rotational program. I see a lot of value in them. And so had the chance to work as an HR generalist in recruitment strategy, talent management, and compensation, and worked in compensation for a few years before going to get my MBA at NYU Stern. I was an AWS intern on a team doing talent research, and so happy to talk about that later. And since joining the program full-time, I started in a role on our employee relations team, so doing HR investigations, moved to a role on one of our employee survey teams, so really focused around employee sentiment and how do we improve the employee experience. And then a few weeks ago, transitioned to a role as a HR business partner supporting our Amazon infrastructure services business. So happy to dive into more of what that looks like as we dive in.
Thank you. So before we jump into learning more about your roles here at Amazon, I want to hear about your transition from business school. So today we have an audience with us that has both first and second year MBAs, and you two were once in their shoes. So what was a crucial lesson or experience that helped you with this transition from business school, and what made you choose Amazon?
I can start. So I've actually done that transition just now, right? I graduated in May, started full time in July. So I'd say it's pretty recent in my mind, my transition from business school to work. I think my biggest lesson or learning through this period has been, one, to be patient with myself. More than anything, business world and being in a master's program is very different than going back to a workforce, going back to working and just having different projects that might be way more long term than what you would have in a business program, right? I would have deliverables that were very short term, right? And so now as I'm in the workforce back again and I'm working, I keep on thinking about, well, it takes time. Projects are way more long-term. Deliverables are thinking about the future of what we're trying to do here. And so being patient with myself and thinking, okay, you'll get there. It's a learning transition from going to a very short-term mentality to going back to thinking about the future and what we're trying to change here. So I'd say my biggest lesson learned right now is that patience with myself, understanding that not everything will be delivered right now, and that I'm actually working towards a bigger project and a bigger mentality than just something that might be a semester or a quarter, which is what I think through 2 years in business school, that's the mentality you sometimes get into. And so I think that's been my biggest learning as I transition back into the workforce. Oh, and why I chose AWS at Amazon. I'm sorry, that was part of the question. I think for both of us, our decision was during our internship, in the sense that we might have recruited heavily while we were looking at internships. And for me, Amazon stood out as a very forward-looking, really quick to adjust and adapt at changing environments. And I wanted that. I wanted to be challenged every day. I wanted to have a different set of problems every day. And so I knew Amazon was going to give me that because of how its culture is set up. The ownership aspect of it all really just pushes you to challenge yourself. And that's why I ended up choosing Amazon as my internship. The internship was successful. I had a great time with it. And that just meant a very easy decision as I was coming back full time.
Awesome. For me, I think biggest lesson learned in terms of transitioning from business school back to full-time work was really leveraging and pulling on my network. You heard a little bit as Audra was talking earlier about the support provided through the HRLDP program. So that includes, an HRLDP buddy, a mentor, your manager, an executive sponsor, the HRLDP program manager. So lots and lots of support. And the connections that I had made during my internship. So that kind of village of people was very helpful as I transitioned back to AWS after graduating from my MBA. And I would extend that as well to my business school friends and colleagues too. I think as we all navigated the return to work, it was helpful to have that network and kind of share best practices together. For why Amazon, my answer is quite similar to Inez. Amazon's culture definitely was what most interested me. And as I started talking to HR professionals here and others, was the reason that I joined. And specifically what that looks like and what that means to me is that, one, our Amazon leadership principles really are discussed and part of everyday decision-making, conversation. It's not just lip service, it's really how we operate. And so being in such a strong culture that's so grounded in the leadership principles was something I was excited about. And then from an HR perspective, in helping to preserve and evolve that culture. A couple other points I will highlight about that. One of our leadership principles is strive to be Earth's best employer. And so again, from an HR standpoint, I was really excited as I was having informational interviews with folks about what AWS was doing in that space and how AWS was thinking about the future of work. And then the last thing I'll highlight on leadership principles and culture is ownership, which I think Inez also touched on. So at AWS, there is a very strong culture of ownership. If you have an idea, you are invited and encouraged and to some extent expected to write what we call a PR FAQ document, so press release frequently asked question. So you're putting yourself in the shoes of your idea has just launched. What would you say about it to the world? And then working backwards from that announcement, you build out that idea. And this idea of working backwards from the customer and making sure that the customer impact is what we want it to be. So those are some of the reasons that I chose to join Amazon and that I've found to be true in my experience here.
Thank you so much. And, we got a question in via email that might kind of apply to this. So candidates want to know, if I don't have a lot of HR experience, can I apply for this program? So based on your experiences or those of your peers, did you have any peers in the program that did not have that really specific HR background, or, what was your observation while you were in the program?
Yeah, I can start this time around. So yes, we have a mix of folks, mix of backgrounds within the program. Some folks who, like myself, I worked in HR roles exclusively before joining the program. And then within my cohort, there was someone who worked in an education nonprofit in more of a administrative leadership role there. We've had folks who have been very focused on one aspect of HR and some who have had broader exposure. So I think my advice and guidance would be to just really think about what is attractive and interesting to you about the HR field, making sure that it's the right fit for you, something that you want to explore, and then thinking about the various experiences that you've had, even if they haven't been in traditional HR roles. How have you, helped with hiring, helped with leadership development, thought about employee experience and sentiment in the organizations that you've been a part of? What work have you done around diversity, equity, and inclusion? So I think there are many ways in which you probably have had some exposure and experience in the HR field, even if you haven't had that direct experience.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And actually it plays into our next question. And Depica, if you want to go on. So we've heard a little bit about it and now your business school experience, but talk to us a little bit more about your current roles and like who are your stakeholders and customers. So I think all of us at Amazon, we all have stakeholders, we all have customers. So customer obsession is one of those leadership principles. So could you walk us through that in a little bit more detail? Because obviously it's going to change, depending on the role that you're in within HR.
Do you want me to start this time, Ines?
Sure.
Yeah, so my current role, I am a HR business partner supporting our Amazon Infrastructure Services organization. And so what that means, the purpose of that organization is that we build the foundation for the world's innovation. And so the team owns designing, planning, delivering AWS global infrastructure. So if you think about data centers that allow us to have the storage and essentially keeping the cloud running is one way that we've described it. So supporting you streaming your Netflix videos and so forth. And so I'm supporting 3 directors within that organization, each with about 200 employees. And specifically, I am supporting projects around compensation, leadership development, org design, employee experience. And so getting to touch on a broad range of HR topics in this kind of generalist HR business partner role. So in terms of the stakeholders and the folks that I work with closely, of course, the business leaders that I am supporting and thinking about the people strategies for their organizations. And then I also work closely with more central HR teams. And so whether that's workforce planning, compensation, employee relations, et cetera, the kind of experts in these particular areas of HR, we work together in shaping that, again, HR strategy for the organization.
So funnily enough, Anna and I currently are both in the same business line. And so from my side, I currently support a leader who works on construction of data centers. So even before the data center is there, you've got a team that's been working for a very long time to put that data center together. And so we're talking about teams that are understanding way more from a a future looking perspective of where are we building, where do we need energy, where is the future going towards in terms of how much do we need. And so a very different, if you want, aspect of when we think about AWS. Infrastructure is a big part of it. It's just a part that we might not have in mind, but we need energy, we need storage, we need so many things to currently keep our business running. And this is what these teams are doing. And so I'm currently also in an HR business partner role, where, as Anna said, most of it is about working with both our business leaders as well as working with our expertise people in HR. In my case, I currently am working with a lot of folks in Europe. So part of the structure that I'm supporting is actually sitting in Dublin, but in also quite a couple number of different countries over there. And so other complexities that come up include the different realities of each country, and that each country is actually not the same in how they work together. And so what does that mean for as an HR business partner and as a leader? How do you create that cohesiveness and that one for all when policies are different, laws are different? There's so many different realities outside of just that one place. And so because it's such a more of a broader space, it's definitely been an interesting challenge to be able to help and understand what's happening at such a global level as it is in this company. And then on the side, I also do a little bit more of program management. I'm currently working on a project trying to help the broader EMEA infrastructure team. And so part of my role as a senior HR business partner right now is partnering and thinking more broadly, what are some strategies or projects we could like develop in the short term to help the team develop.
You were in a development program, and now you are helping develop others. So it's, not what, I used to think of. And I was actually an HR, like double major when I was an undergrad, and not what I expected my career in HR to look like. So this is really interesting to hear more about. So that's your current, full-time roles. You were, Ines, you were a former intern, then you joined Amazon full-time. What do you believe helped you stand out as an intern in order to receive a return offer?
For sure. I think a couple of things. One of them was not being afraid of diving deep. You've got 12 weeks in this program as an intern. There's not enough time to do everything you want to, but I'd say I was not afraid to just talk to the business, get to know what I like, my project, what I was delivering, and just talking to people and understanding what their realities were so that I could potentially put my project together. So I think in that sense, not being afraid to just go out there, be an owner, just end to end, diving deep on what the project was, I think was super critical. I think in helping me stand out as a candidate in my internship. And then I think the other part, I think, is learn and be curious, another LP for us, which is just noticing that everybody is constantly learning and is constantly curious about what other teams are doing or what you're developing. And so I think understanding that as an intern, there's so much to learn, and constantly embodying that in like being that as you're in your internship, I think was super important to just show that I was ready to learn. There is so much to learn out there. And I really wanted, part of this program is about learning, right? There are 3 rotations. You go through different roles. There's an innate curiosity that needs to exist for you to be like, yeah, I want to discover what HR looks like in this organization and what are some of the possibilities that I could be sitting in later on. And so I think that part was also a different way to stand out, more from a cultural and like personal aspect.
And then, Anna, I'll flip it over to you. So you've completed a few rotations now. So Ines talked about, I heard learn and be curious. I heard dive deep. Again, for everyone on the call, these are all Amazon leadership principles. So make sure that you study those if you're selected to interview. So just hint there. But Anna, can you tell us, what has helped you make the transitions to your new roles throughout this program, and if there's any LPs that you really leaned on during that process?
Yeah. So I'll say I am a big fan of this book called The First 90 Days. And so would recommend that to folks on the phone here as you're entering any new job. Provides some helpful guidance and questions to be thinking about as you're entering a new position. But in terms of what specifically helped me, one, I've had the chance to shadow as I've entered new rotations. So, as I was entering my rotation doing HR investigations, obviously that's a space that we need to get right every time. And so spent a lot of time shadowing and then reverse shadowing where, my mentor was there as support while I was leading. Similarly, with talent reviews as an HR business partner, I had the chance to attend a talent review and see, a principal HRBP run a talent review before I was running one myself. So those are a couple of things. I would just echo what Ines said in terms of asking lots of questions, not being afraid to question, why we're doing things a certain way. And then I would say, as I've gone through the HRLDP program, something that I've found helpful is to really leverage and connect my past experiences. So when I was transitioning from an HR investigations role to employee survey, employee sentiment role, seeing, what are those common pain points that we're seeing, what are common themes. And then as I've moved into an HR business partner role, just next week, I'll be talking with the business leaders that I'm supporting about the results of the employee survey that I helped, run the prior quarter. And so being able to see kind of where are these touch points across the different roles in HR function, I think is a unique opportunity through this program. And again, I think it helps you more quickly connect the dots in terms of what are we trying to do as an AWS PXT or HR function, and how do all those pieces fit together?
Thank you so much. All right, let's switch gears just a little bit. So one thing, and I heard you both say this, so at Amazon, I mean, from day one, you are rolling up your sleeves and you're just, getting things done. One question we get asked a lot as recruiters is like, well, what do interns actually do? So, it's like, oh, you're an HR intern. Well, what does that mean exactly at Amazon? And I know you can't, a lot of things that we do within HR, we can't necessarily say, to great detail, be proprietary, but do either one of you recall an internship project or an assignment that really excited you or had a lot of impact on you throughout your experience?
I can quickly give a little bit of an overview of what my internship project was like. So in this case, I was part of what's the utility computing team as an intern. I was supporting an HR business partner. So I was with an HR business partner, and I was doing a project that was helping a specific talent group of people inside of the scope that they had. And so for me, what my internship looked like was delivering what's called a 6-pager, so a document where I was sharing, if you want, a guide of what does this specific group of people, like, why do they stay at Amazon? What makes them engaged at Amazon? How does this group of people who were very unique in terms of like their professional experience and what they did, like what makes them so intrinsic to the business and so important, and whether or not we needed to start thinking about them differently in terms of how we approached from an HR perspective, right? Like, are we actually having them be successful at Amazon? Was what we currently have enough to keep these type of people involved and potentially staying at the company? And so a lot of my project was really understanding a part of the business and really understanding the people in that business. And like my project, that deliverable 6 pages, in a short amount of time, I became the expert on the topic in terms of like understanding what this talent was doing and why they were so important to the business, especially thinking about the future. And then potentially also understanding the complexities behind it. And my 6-pager was the start of what is and continues being a conversation in that area around, are we doing enough to retain this talent? How do we bring more of this type of talent into the company? And so in that sense, incredibly impactful to see my work continue on in the teams that I was in, and see that still be part of a conversation that they're having. They continue developing and they continue doing programs and specific initiatives to help this group of employees. And so in that sense, that's an example of a project that was not just you delivering something in 12 weeks from an internship, but actually the start of something bigger. And so I think that's why we talk about impactful projects, especially as interns, because we're actually there's a whole process behind what type of project you come into, what teams you come into. And so we're very intentional behind what are some of the projects that we give our interns. And it really shows, because later, again, I reached out to a couple of people in the summer and they were like, yeah, like your 6-pager became this guide and this other thing that we're doing. And now we're like doing things a little bit different, taking into consideration what you did over the summer. So just the impact that you have, it's not just the 12 weeks and what you've delivered, it's a very long term. You're adding and helping the business, you're helping HR in our journey to make this a better place for everybody.
How about you, Anna? Any projects, notable projects or impactful projects?
Yeah, something that I would highlight is while working on the employee survey team, I had the chance to write a document. So you're starting to hear a theme about our writing culture here at Amazon, and bring that document into 10 or so director and VP level staff meetings to talk about key trends around employee sentiment and employee experience, and identify a couple of key opportunities, and then facilitate discussion in partnership with HR business partners to align on a couple of specific actions the leadership team was going to take in the next quarter to improve the employee experience, and being able to see that direct result of the conversation, whether it was the stand up of a new recognition program, or better communication, more frequent communications from leadership, or whatever it might be, to again improve the employee experience, was really meaningful and work that I really enjoyed.
Thank you for that. We have two more questions, and then Renee and Depica have sent me some questions that have come through the inbox. So next slide, you have both personally been through an Amazon interview loop. Well, all of us have. And there's a lot of information out there, lots of YouTube rumors and everything like that. So since you both obviously successfully passed an Amazon interview loop, tell us how you prepared yourself, or why do you feel like you were prepared for the Amazon interview?
I can start. So as was mentioned previously, would definitely recommend spending time reading through the leadership principles. Specifically for me, something that I did was essentially create a table with all the leadership principles on one axis, and then a number of my kind of core work experiences on the other axis, and seeing where have I had the opportunity to demonstrate specific leadership principles. And likely there are a couple for each experience, but also making sure that the examples that I'm prepared to offer aren't all around learn and be curious, but there's also examples of how I demonstrated ownership or demonstrated customer obsession, etc. So that's a very kind of tactical way that I went about things. Just a couple of pointers I would offer. One, for me, I have a horrible memory, and so it was important that I spent time reminding myself around the specifics of some of my pre-MBA experiences, to the extent you can quantify the impact that you had in particular roles, or help the interviewer understand, the scope of the project that you were working. That's really helpful. And that, again, requires maybe some refresh of the memory or digging up of old materials. So that's one thing I would say. I would also share that it's definitely kind of a marathon of a day versus a sprint. It was mentioned, four interviews. And so making sure that you are taking care of yourself and making sure that you're staying hydrated and fed, and that you're kind of thinking about the day ahead of you, and with your examples, making sure that you have, enough material that you're ready and prepped to talk about, to cover for interviews. So those are a couple of my tips. But Inez, anything you would add?
Oh, I had an Excel too, and I had the LPs on one side and the examples on the other, and so we're not very diverse in terms of what we've done to prep. For sure, thinking about LPs in your examples is the biggest part of prepping for an Amazon interview. Just to add a couple of things, fully agree with a lot that Anna said, because I did exactly the same thing. Just going back and understanding, what are those examples? What's your career like? What examples can you quantify? How do you attach them to how they demonstrate certain leadership principles? I think a couple of extra things is, for sure, have a robust amount of examples. You do not want to have to rely on the same type of story or the same type of example to answer questions. Obviously, some stories are more stronger than others, but others still are strong enough to be part of your interview. So don't think that those are not something you should prep, because you should. A lot of follow up questions can come up from an interview, right? So like, you want to be robust enough on your own examples to be able to share that. Obviously, I think the STAR model and thinking about reflection at the end is incredibly important, because it's not just about the situation, the task, the action you took. Like, you really want to think about, after that result, you want to think about a little bit of reflection, like, what's your learning from some of these cases? And I think that was something I really spend time on, to know what was a learning I had, or what I would have done differently, or just understanding a little bit more, so that you can actually show reflection on those situations, because obviously no situation we handle it perfectly, right? So just thinking about how you would do it differently if you had the chance, I feel really shows ownership in your stories, and ownership in, I want to do it better next time. But I think those were, for sure, the marathon concept is a big one. It's 4 interviews. It could add up to a little bit less than 4 hours, right? So just really prep, have those stories straight. But at the end of the day, remember that they're your stories, right? Like, you know them, you lived through them. So remember to be just authentic, who you are, share that through your interview, and be able to show, like, you've got what it takes to be part of this company, and that you're also excited to be part of this company, because I always think a little bit of excitement is definitely good in showing, hey, why is Amazon the place for me?
Yeah, it's funny. I was also interviewing with another tech company at the same time as interviewing with Amazon. And one of the reasons I chose Amazon was because our interview process is really long. I actually interviewed with 5 people, not 4, what this group will be doing. And I left my Amazon, like, I had more energy than what I started with. And I think it was just because I was so excited to talk to these folks. So I took that as a good sign. So it's kind of funny that you're saying something similar. I don't know. I think I may have said this, but I just want to make sure to clarify. So your interviews for this program will be behavioral based. So I know we talk about that in certain classes and certain programs, but the interview method is really the STAR method, or we like to say the START method. So situation, task, action, result, and then takeaway. So when you are creating your rubric of, with your Excel sheet, with your access of the LPs and your examples, which, by the way, in the interview, you are able, since they are virtual, you're able to have that like right in front of you. So I would highly recommend having that on your computer screen, because that really helped me through, organize my examples. But make sure that you're really thinking through, and you're not going to have it written out, word for word like a book. But making sure that you're covering all components of the STAR method to give a really holistic, comprehensive example for each question. Because the Amazon interview process also is we don't just ask the question and move on. We're going to keep asking questions over and over again. And that throws people off quite a bit in our process. Like, well, I answered the question. Most other companies would just move on, but no, we want to keep diving deep and figuring out and learning more. So thank you both for sharing those really, really great examples. I think it's really helpful and hopefully gives them some tips on how to better prepare themselves. Last question before we get to the general Q&A. So at Amazon, we always say we work hard and we play hard. So we have fun outside of work. So can you both share your advice or experience on this topic? Like, how do you balance your work and personal life?
I can start. So I honestly think this question is very personal in the sense that, like, you know what makes you feel balanced in your day to day, right? Some people will go on a run in the morning and will dedicate time to exercising before the start or at the end of the day. For me, exercising is a big thing. So I am currently playing softball on Wednesdays, and for the most part, I try to have that time as a full time for me, and really understanding that that's a commitment that I'm doing for myself. And so usually on Wednesdays is like one day in the week where I try to not have any late meetings or anything close to that time, so I can make that work. I think a piece of advice I would say as I'm thinking about this, I think you even do it when you're in your MBA, right? Balancing is a constant act and a constant refreshing of, am I balancing my life? Am I taking enough time for myself? And so my advice to you would be potentially always ask yourself. I usually try to ask myself once a quarter, and if I look back at my quarter, do I feel that this has been like the balance that I want to have in my day? And that's been super helpful as a checking for me. And hey, like, are you too stretched towards work? And sometimes you want to be, right? Sometimes that's where you want to dedicate time. But at the same time, you might be like, is this sustainable long term? Do I need to have some other things in my day that will make me feel as excited about work, because I'm excited also about some personal projects that I might have? And so I think checking in with yourself and really just assessing whether or not you're feeling balanced is the best way to do it all, because life will never stay constant, right? So I think that a reassessment of whether or not you're balancing it well, or at least to a point that you're happy with it, is my advice to you all.
And I would just share, I've been really pleased with my work-life balance at Amazon. I've had a series of managers who have all been very supportive of making sure both me and my peers are able to have meaningful time at work and at home. I think, Amazon, like any global company, time zones will always be a challenge. So as an example, I had an early call this morning because there were members of the team from Luxembourg, and so was trying to be respectful of their work-life balance by hopping on a call. And so I took that call at home and then took my time to commute into the office later and was able to make that work. My kind of more practical tips are, definitely using your calendar to block time that you need for personal reasons, or for just managing across the many different projects and work streams you might be involved with. And then just being clear with your manager and your team about both your capacity, where you're at given what you have on your plate, and then being clear about expectations on when and how you are available outside of work hours, and if there's particular times that you are fully disconnected and other times where you might be able to take a early call or a late call or whatever that might be in order to operate in this global environment. But that's what I would share there. Again, overall, I've been really pleased with how I've been able to live the life that I want.
All right. Well, before we get into our few questions, I did want to make sure everyone on the call is aware of some of our upcoming events. So we'll have a slide, I think, up that will show that. So feel free to take a picture of these events and the dates and times that are coming. So we'll leave it up for a minute or so, and then we'll switch to the Q&A. So I have a couple questions. So our panelists have not had the chance to prepare answers for these. And if not, we can always follow up. So for the rotations in the HRLDP, is it the individual's choice or is it structured? Or what was your experience?
Yeah, I can start. So it is a combination of your personal interests and development needs and the business needs. So the HRLDP program manager works closely with the AWS PXT, so HR leadership team, to understand where are kind of key projects and priorities for a given year, as well as what are the current interests of HRLDP participants. So how that has worked for me is, I've received a list of opportunities and been able to submit my preferences, and then been partnered with the managers for these rotations to have kind of an informational chat about what the role would be, what their managerial style is, get to know members of the team, and just make sure that it's the right fit for that moment in time and for my development goals. And so I've been happy with the roles that I've been able to participate in. They've aligned with my interests.
Fully agree with the same process. So
Yeah.
don't want to we can jump into the next question.
Okay. So Anna mentioned one book recommendation, The First 90 Days. Another question that came through was, well, one, are there any book recommendations? And number two, are there any courses that I could pick up this year which have helped you from business school? So there is, Jeff Bezos did write a book about the leadership principles. So that's my book recommendation, because you can dive deep into each of those, because they're very good principles to apply for wherever you're interviewing and wherever you're working post B school. So that's my one book recommendation. But yeah, Ines, if you have any other book recommendations, and then either of you, if there were any courses in business school that particularly helped you in your current roles, that'd be great to hear as well.
I can definitely tackle more on the courses side. I think I did a lot of courses around leadership, working with teams, and just thinking about either coaching effectively or really being like empathetic and understanding people where they're at and how to help them. And I think that has been incredibly helpful in the 3 months that I've been here, especially as an HR business partner. You are a soundboard for your leaders. You are a coach in terms of thinking about how to manage a team and how to think about what's the best way forward for a team, right? And so I think from that side, a lot of my leadership courses that I focused on during my MBA were extremely helpful in thinking who I am as a leader, how can I impact others, and what's the best way to, if you want, be persuasive and be able to change other people's mind. And I think that has been incredibly helpful as I'm thinking about this first rotation as an HR business partner, because you're constantly trying to advocate for others, advocate for your business, and potentially work with others in order to get that solution that you're looking for. And sometimes it's not that easy. And sometimes there's a lot of working with others that comes into play. And so a lot of courses around that have been very helpful, and I can already see them replicated in the work that I do.
And then just to chime in, I have kind of a different approach in business school, where I purposely tried to take classes outside of the HR space. And so a couple that come to mind, I took a number of coding classes. To be honest, I have not been coding, which is my own fault. But it did teach me like the language, the vernacular around technology. And I found that to be very useful in at least having kind of a baseline understanding of what some of the teams I'm supporting are doing, how they operate, and their day-to-days. I think also taking, finance classes and other classes that help you understand the business as a whole, I think can be a real differentiator for HR talent especially in an HR business partner role, where you're able to understand, okay, what are the kind of financial considerations that a leader is thinking through? Where do people fall into that? From like strategy classes, I think are really helpful, both in developing HR strategy, but also, again, thinking about business strategy more holistically. And then just the last thing I would share there is I think most business schools, unless you're in a master's in HR program, you might be, one of only a couple of people interested in HR. And I thought that was a really unique opportunity to, in projects, practice, voicing your perspective as an HR professional. And you might have people in your group that have a finance background, an IT background, whatever it might be. And so I think it's good prep for the workplace, where you're working cross-functionally and with lots of folks who might not spend all of their time kind of thinking about people topics.
Very, very good advice. So we only have 2 minutes left. One of the last questions that we got was, any tips to make your resume stand out? So, I will just say is, we are reviewing applications, and I think in general at Amazon, being able to quantify as much as you can qualify your experience is going to be helpful. So it doesn't matter if you didn't save the company $1 million, but putting numbers onto your resume so I can see the impact. That's what we're always looking for, not just in the resume itself, but in the interview, is the impact that you made. And we know that you're never going to have Amazon sized numbers to show impact when you're not working at a company as large as Amazon. So what was the impact where you were? So tell us a little bit more about that. So in the last minute and a half that we have for both of you, in 2 to 3 sentences, what advice do you have for our audience? You're sitting in their shoes, 1 to 1.5 to 2.5 years ago. What do you want to leave them with?
Learn about Amazon, learn about yourself as you're prepping through the behaviorals, and think how those two match up together, whether they do. And if that's the case, then good luck on your interview.
Love it. The only thing I would add to that is learn about the AWS business. You don't have to be an expert. I am still definitely learning all that we do here today, but I think having that baseline understanding, and then where can you drive impact as an HR professional, starting to think through that, putting your shoes in the place of an HRLDP would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. Thank you so much to our just lovely panelists. And thank you for our attendees. I don't know that I've ever facilitated a 1-hour presentation that had so many people remaining at the end as it was the beginning. So definitely kudos to the two of you for keeping our audience engaged. We really hope that you learn more about the HRLDP. And so for those of you who are now really interested in interning with us because of the stories that these two shared, please don't forget that the application is live. We will be emailing out more information about our events. We'll send out the link to this posting for the AWS HRLDP, as well as access to some of our other resources. So thank you everybody so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.